Deep within the molten heart of Ruin, at the height of the Second Age, a shadow was cast that would eventually stretch across 3 millennia, darkening the history of every race in Arda. We often look at the One Ring as the ultimate symbol of Sauron's power, a masterpiece of sorcery and smithcraft that allowed a fallen Maya to nearly bring the world to its knees. But as the towers of Barad-dûr finally crumbled and the Dark Lord was reduced to a mere spirit of malice, a haunting question remained for the lore masters of the Fourth Age. Did Sauron make a fundamental mistake in creating the One Ring? Welcome to Echoes of Middle-earth, where today we are analyzing the ultimate gamble of the Dark Lord, exploring how his greatest instrument of dominion became the very needle that punctured his immortality. To understand if the ring was a mistake, we must first recognize the strategic necessity that drove its creation. Sauron was, in his essence, a being of knowledge, rule, and order. After the chaotic ruin of the First Age and the removal of his master, Morgoth, Sauron did not initially seek to destroy Middle-earth, but to order and govern it according to his own will. He perceived that the High Elves were the greatest obstacle to this vision, for they were the most skilled and possessed a lingering power from the Blessed Realm. In Eregion, appearing as Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, Sauron ensnared the Elven smiths by playing upon their desire to postpone the weariness of the world and make Middle-earth as fair as Valinor. Under his guidance, the Gwaith the Myrdain reached the pinnacle of their craft, forging the rings of power to achieve this preservation.
However, Sauron's desire was for absolute vigilance and a bond upon the elves. To achieve this, he was forced to perform a dangerous act of externalization. He forged the One Ring in the Mountain of Fire, and because the power of the elven rings was so great, he had to pour a great part of his own former power into this single golden band. This was the foundation of his strength of old, a sorcerous remote control that allowed him to perceive all things that were done by means of the lesser rings, and even to see and govern the very thoughts of those who wore them. On the surface, this was a masterstroke. It provided him with a mechanism of control that spanned the continent, turning the pride and strength of other races into his own assets. The immediate mistake in this design was a psychological one. Sauron, for all his cunning, underestimated the spiritual sensitivity of the Eldar. The moment he set the One Ring upon his finger in Mordor, the elves were aware of him. They perceived his treachery and realized that he would be their master. In an instant of defiance, they took off their rings, frustrating his plan for an immediate and bloodless coup. This led to the ruinous war of the elves and Sauron, the death of Celebrimbor, and the destruction of Eregion. Events that established Sauron as the Dark Lord, but failed to secure the 3 rings, which the elves had hidden from his touch.
Structural vulnerability, however, is where the creation of the ring truly becomes a liability. By investing so much of his native power into a physical object, Sauron created a single point of failure. While he held the ring, his power on Earth was actually enhanced. He was stronger than ever, but this strength was tethered to a material form that could be lost. We see the consequences of this at the end of the Second Age during the Battle of Dagorlad and the Siege of Barad-dûr. Despite the ring's power, Sauron was overthrown by the last alliance of elves and men. When Isildur cut the ring from his hand, Sauron was vanquished, his spirit fled into the waste places, and he was unable to take a visible shape again for many long years. If the ring had been destroyed then and there on the slopes of Mount Doom, Sauron's fall would have been total and final. But here we see the insidious success of the ring's design. It was fair to look on and possessed a will to preserve itself. Isildur, though a man of high lineage, was seduced by its beauty and claimed it as weregild for his father and brother, refusing to cast it into the fire. In this sense, the ring was Sauron's life insurance policy. Because it survived, its maker survived. His spirit remained anchored to Arda, allowing him to eventually return to Mirkwood and then to his rebuilt Dark Tower. The Third Age, then, becomes a long-form analysis of Sauron's greatest mistake, pride-induced blindness. Sauron weighed all hearts in the nicety of his malice, and the only measure he knew was the desire for power. He believed that his enemies, having found the ring, would inevitably attempt to use it against him. This assumption governed all his strategies during the War of the Ring. When Aragorn revealed himself through the Stone of Orthanc, Sauron did not suspect a quest to destroy the ring. He supposed that this heir of Isildur had claimed the Master Ring and was attempting to set himself up as a rival power. This error in judgment led Sauron to strike too soon and too far. He emptied his land to crush the supposed new Ring Lord, falling directly into the trap laid by Gandalf and the captains of the West. He was so focused on the threat of a military challenge from the upstart king that he entirely overlooked the small hands that were moving the wheels of the world. His eye was turned abroad rather than near at home, and he left the passage to Mount Doom effectively unguarded against the two little squeaking ghosts who were creeping through his ash heaps.
The magnitude of his folly was only revealed to him in a blinding flash when Frodo Baggins stood at the very crack of doom and set the ring upon his finger. In that moment, Sauron finally understood the devices of his enemies and the thread upon which his doom now hung. From all his policies and webs of fear and treachery, his mind shook free, and he was filled with a vast black smoke of terror. But it was too late. The wise fool had spent an age building a fortress upon a foundation of gold that could now be dissolved in an instant. When the ring was finally unmade, not through the strength of the elves or the wisdom of the great, but through the pity of Bilbo and the desperate greed of Gollum, the consequence for Sauron was catastrophic. Because he had let so much of his native strength pass into the object, its destruction meant he lost the best part of the strength that was native to him in his beginning. He was maimed forever, becoming a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, which can never again grow or take shape. All that he had built with the power of the ring, including the very foundations of Barad-dûr, crumbled into ruin. So was the creation of the ring a mistake? If Sauron's goal was a temporary, ego-inflating era of dominion that would ultimately lead to his absolute annihilation, then the ring was a roaring success. It allowed him to cheat death in the Second Age and to command a global war machine in the Third. But in the long view of the great music, it was the ultimate act of folly. He took a spirit that was meant to be coeval with Manwë and bound it to a circular piece of metal that a common hobbit could carry in his pocket. He chose rule over being, and in doing so, he made himself vulnerable to the one thing he could not understand: the rejection of power. As Gandalf noted, Sauron's very wisdom was his undoing. He could not conceive that anyone would possess the ring and seek only to destroy it. This blindness of malice is the hallmark of all Tolkien's villains, from Melkor marring the music to Saruman's mind of metal and wheels. Sauron's mistake was not merely a tactical error in Eregion or a failure to guard the Sammath Naur. It was the metaphysical error of believing that he could order the world through a mechanism of force. He tried to hack the themes of Ilúvatar with a golden ring, only to find that he had merely provided the instrument of his own long defeat. The flame of Udun was ultimately extinguished by a word of command higher than any he could speak, leaving him a shadow in a world that had moved past him into a new spring. Thank you for joining us for this deep investigation into the dark philosophy of the Ringmaker here on Echoes of Middle-earth.
If you enjoyed this journey through the pride and the fall of Sauron, make sure to like and subscribe as we continue to unearth the hidden truths and profound legends of Tolkien's world. Until the stars of the Valacerca shine again on our meeting, may your heart stay as unyielding as the mountains and your path be lit by the light that never fades.